Alright, so you've submitted your cover letter, you submitted your resume, and someone called you back and said, we want to talk to you. Well, now what do? Remember the reason that we interview. There are 3 reasons that we're looking to do. First, we want to get to know you. Who are you? What knowledge, skills, and attitudes do you really have? Remember, you can put anything you want on a resume. But now if you're right in front of me and you're actually responding to my questions, I'm going to see how much of that was true. Get to like you. Certain companies have a very particular culture. Some are very laid back, some are very professional, some are 9 to 5, some are more work whenever you feel like it. The interviewer wants to know whether or not you're going to fit in here. Finally, get to trust you. A chance to be confident that our investment will pay off. What that means is they're willing to take a huge chance that they're going to pay you thousands of dollars and spend 8 hours a day with you, and you said that you could do X, Y, and Z, and they're going to take a chance that you can actually do it. The interview is your chance to convince them that it is worth it. A couple of things you need to do when you're getting ready for your first interview is to become familiar with your own application. They're going to ask you about your resume. They're going to say, I noticed you worked at this company. Can you please describe that experience? They're going to ask you things like, can you tell me about a time when you disagreed with a manager? Don't forget about the jobs or the experiences that you had. Now here's a personal story. I did that once. I submitted an application package and I didn't really review it before my interview. And so they came and they said, well, I noticed in your interview, in your application package, you said that you have a particular attitude. Can you please explain a little bit? I actually had forgotten that I wrote that. And so I had to think back very, very quickly and I panicked a little bit. It was pretty obvious. I didn't get that job because I wasn't familiar with myself and my application. I didn't let them trust me because it seems as though I made it up and forgot about it. The next thing is to become familiar with the job description. They're going to ask you questions about how you can do what they want. You need to be fairly confident that you can do it. Now sometimes they're going to ask you about a skill that you don't have. It's okay not to know everything. I do not expect my interviewees to come in having absolutely perfect knowledge of my company and the job. That is fine. However, if I ask you a question about a skill you don't have and you haven't really prepared an answer for how you're going to work around that, then that's a red flag for me. So how do you answer that question? Well, the first thing you need to understand is that if you start making stuff up, it's going to be obvious unless you're extremely good at lying, and I do not recommend doing that. So be honest. Tell me that you don't know, or you don't have that particular skill, or that that's not something your experience really aligns with. But then tell me that you do have a plan for how you're going to learn it. That might involve going to online courses. It might involve asking people who already work at the company, and that's perfectly acceptable to do. If they ask you a technical question and you're not sure, offer to follow up and then actually do. So if they ask you, for example, have you ever worked with this software, and if so, here's an error, can you fix it? And you've never really done that, then you say, I don't know, but please let me look into it and I will get back to you. As soon as you're out of the interview, you go find out and you send a message to that hiring manager or the interviewer and you explain to them the answer to their question. Otherwise, it looks as though you promise you're going to follow up, then you never really do. You want to be excited and willing to learn. You may not know everything, but if you're willing to learn it and you're willing to put in those hours, then that's okay. Another thing you have to do is understand the company. If you start talking about something that doesn't make any sense for their company or the plan, then it's going to look as though you don't really know what it's like to work there. So for example, what is their market? How big is it? How are they marketing and how are they advertising? How many people want to buy them? What is their industry? So do you understand the needs of the industry? Perhaps they're supplying a critical component to other companies. Maybe they're working in a very, very competitive industry. If you don't know that and you're not coming in with that understanding, then you're going to look as though you're not really sure about what the company does. Also understand who are their customers. Are they selling to individuals? Are they selling to companies? Are they selling to governments? How many customers do they have? What do they want? And finally, understand who are their competitors. Now, the interview is not a time to start bashing their competitors and talking about how much you prefer them to their competitor. That's not what it's for. But if you can understand their strengths and weaknesses compared to their competitors' strengths and weaknesses, you're going to come in and you're going to look like you really understand what they need and how you can help them to get an edge over their competitors. But remember, do not go in there and tell them how much you hate their competitors. That's the wrong thing to do. Talking about how they have leverage and how they have strengths over their competitors, that's a great idea. So what's the biggest mistake you can make? Well, it's to appear like you don't understand what they need. That goes from the job description, it goes from the industry, it goes from understanding the company. The worst question you can ask is, well, what is it you do around here? What's this job for? Some people ask whether or not they should practice a job interview before they do it. It depends on you. A lot of people are really capable, maybe they've interviewed a lot, and they are capable of walking in and just handling themselves well. Some people aren't, especially if it's your first interview. Practicing is probably a very good idea. In the next video, we will talk about some common interview questions. It's a really great idea to practice those. You can also practice talking about yourself and answering some of the harder questions. One of the hardest questions is, well, tell us about yourself. Why do you want to work here? When you're practicing, remember that this is an actual conversation you're having with a real person. Sometimes you stumble. Sometimes you talk over yourself or you forget a word. That's okay. That isn't what you should be fixing. What you should be fixing is when someone asks a question like, tell me about yourself, and you stare at them and you can't answer it. So don't make a script. Don't try to remember that this is exactly what I have to say with this intonation, whatever it is. You're not an actor on a stage. Instead, be familiar enough with your job description that you can talk about it in many, many different ways. An interviewing trick that a lot of people use is they're going to ask you a question about the job description and you're going to have your scripted answer, and then they're going to ask the exact same question but in different wording so it looks like it's different and you're not prepared for that. That's the downside to scripting. But if you're familiar with your job application, you're familiar with what they're looking for, you're familiar with the company, you're not going to have that problem. You just need a little bit of practice maybe to understand what happens to you and how you feel when they ask those questions. So definitely practice, but don't worry too much about it. It's a conversation. We're not looking for someone who's prepared every single answer and is fully capable of answering right away. So the next step is to prepare for those common interview questions. They're often the hardest, where you talk about yourself, where you talk about why you want the job. Go to the next video to find out.